Can we enjoy God in the secondary pleasures of life? This is day 5 of our study on the 50 Days of Heaven by Randy Alcorn. Can we enjoy God in the secondary pleasures of life? We talked about last time God being the central pleasure in our lives. Now we're going to talk about Him being able to be enjoyed in our secondary things. In Romans 8:32, Scripture says, He did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for all. How will He not also, along with Him, graciously give us all things? It's such an amazing contrast in there that God gave up His only Son. He gave up Jesus for us. So why would God not give us the other things that would be considered less valuable to us if He gave us the most valuable possible thing in all of creation, the gift of Himself, the gift of His Son, so that we can have access to Him? A lot of times people think about heaven as being this kind of boring place where we sit on clouds all day and play harps and sing music all day, and it's like one big giant worship concert all day long. And the reality is if that was what heaven was going to be like, I don't think that I would want to take part in that either. I don't enjoy singing. I'm not I don't go to church for that worship time. It's not my primary reason. I mean, I enjoy being able to worship with God. I feel like I worship more when I hear music. But I always like to go for the messages, and I know that sounds kind of backwards. Most people are like, oh, I love to hear the music and I love to worship that time. I like to enjoy God's presence during that time. I'm the other way around. I want to hear the message. I want to be fed. I really want to be bathed in what God is saying to the world and how it applies to my life. But heaven isn't this spiritual thing where we sit around and we sing songs all day. There's going to be work. There's going to be labor. There's going to be things that we're going to do. In Scripture, in the book of Revelation, it talks about how individuals, believers, are going to be given authority over different regions to rule those areas, to glorify God in that service to Him. I'm going to read you a couple of quotes real quick out of this book. Instead, they think that for heaven to be spiritual, it must somehow be drab, unappealing, and bereft of any earthly things which they consider unspiritual. Let's talk about people who've looked at heaven and had this idea that it's just going to be this boring place because it has to be liturgical. We're going to be in worship and in church all day. And that's not at all the case when you read the Bible, which is the authoritative text for the things to come. We see that that's a very different contrast. Here's another quote. It says, but sometimes we wrongly conclude that people and things and pleasures are therefore bad, forgetting that it was God Himself that gave them. Some people will go so heavy on their piety and sacrifice so much and try not to enjoy the things in their life because we're supposed to only enjoy God. And the reality is that God has given us the gift. When I give my son a gift, when I give him a good gift, and he gets excited when he unwraps it, and he's so happy, and that brings joy to my heart as the father to look at my son and see that he's enjoying the gift that I put thought work into, that I had the effort to put into it. But on this other hand, when my son loves the gift more than he loves the thought or the act of me giving it, that steals my joy. So vice versa with God. When we celebrate the confines of marriage and all the wonderful things that happen inside marriage and take pleasure in those things and point back to God and say, thank you for this incredible gift. That is right, correct, properly oriented worship for God. So all of those good and perfect gifts have come from the Father above. So those things in your life, the children, especially now if you're on quarantine, who are running wild in the house, probably eating you out of house and home like ours are, that's a gift from God. And being able to focus on that gratitude, being able to look at our children and be grateful and celebrate them for the gift that they are and give thanks to God for that, is how we can enjoy God in those secondary pleasures. And I'm going to end with this quote from Augustine. God Himself, who is the author of virtue, shall be our reward. As there is nothing greater or better than God Himself, God has promised us Himself. God shall be the end of all of our desires, who will be seen without end, loved without joy, loved without cloy, and praised without weariness. We have an opportunity coming here, guys, where we're going to be able to worship God and love Him and be in His presence. But until that day comes, worship Him by being grateful for the gifts that He's given. Worship Him by celebrating the things in our lives, both good and bad. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in a place of suffering right now and you're struggling, this is the only time in all eternity you're ever going to be able to struggle if you are a believer in Jesus Christ. You'll never struggle, you'll never suffer, you'll never have an opportunity to suffer well again. And that's hard to say, and it's hard to palate when you're in the middle of something. But live with the end in mind, knowing that in the end we're going to be seated with Him. We're going to enjoy that time at the lake by Him, or in the mountains with Him, or in the jungle, in that most beautiful place or image in your mind that you have. That's the place and the time that you're going to be able to enjoy Him forever. So focus on that. Focus on Jesus, honoring Jesus and worshiping Him in the secondary pleasures of life. So for the glory of the Lord and the hope of the nations, stay the course.